this really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. And I don't really think most of you who will end up watching this video will be surprised. But the Post-Millennial is writing about a left-wing news outlet, The Atlantic, who is cautioning that and warning their readers that left-wing terrorism is on the rise, which should come as no surprise to us who have been witnessing left-wing radicalism and violence escalate over the last 15 years. We're getting to the point now where I think there's going to be a lot more Charlie Kirks if something isn't done. So let's get into this. This is from the Post-Millennial. The left-leaning Atlantic has reported that the left-wing terrorism is on the rise and has said that there have been more terror attacks from left-wing ideologues than the right in recent years. And by the way, just so we're clear, it's much worse than that because there's been a lot of reclassification of what is right-wing. For example, anti-Semitism has been reclassified as right-wing. But anti-Semitism among the left has been exploding. We're talking over 300% from 2024 to 2023, just to give you an example. And we see, like with the Charlottesville riots, the guy that was leading that, the anti-Semite, this guy was an Occupy Wall Street, radical left-wing nut who just suddenly changed his colors and now became a pious right-winger who was leading anti-Semitism and racism. It's not a common thing for the right, especially anti-Semitism. Most people on the right, or a lot of them, not most, but a lot of right-wingers have, for example, backgrounds that would be more biblical, and Protestant Christians tend to have a more positive view of Jews in general. Now, the Post-Millennial goes on to write that the outlet, The Atlantic, has reported that the research focuses only on incidents of terrorism, which we define as attacks or plots by a non-state actor attempting to achieve a political end and exert a psychological influence on a broad population. The dataset that the outlet used include the types of weapons used, the intended targets, the number of fatalities, and the ideology of the perpetrators. The report cited the election of Donald Trump as the marker for a rising tide of left-wing violence, but also tried to downplay the amount of violence from the left that has taken place. And by the way, that is also a lie. BLM, the hate group BLM, and the hate group and now terrorist group Antifa were there before Donald Trump. Donald Trump, part of the reason why he's president today is because of the hate groups Antifa and BLM. They created a situation that was untenable. Couple that with mass illegal immigration, and people had had enough. Folks were looking for an out, and Donald Trump offered a solution, the return of law and order. Now, his first term was marred. He didn't get it as much done as he wanted, but that's why people voted for him. Now, this report by The Atlantic, the Post-Millennial writes, comes after left-wing radical Tyler Robinson was charged for the assassination of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. Some on the left and media attempted to characterize him as far right. However, not only was that stupid, but authorities have said he was deeply involved in leftist ideology and reportedly inscribed Antifa-linked slogans to the bullets used in the killing. And in text messages between him and his romantic partner and roommate, Lance Twiggs, Robinson appeared to confess to the crime and said, quote, "I had had enough of his hatred," meaning Charlie Kirk. "Some hates cannot be negotiated out." And Twiggs, the guy's lover, whatever, also was a trans person. Now, the paper reported that 2025 is said to be the left's most violent year in more than 3 decades when it comes to politically motivated attacks. This comes as President Donald Trump has also labeled Antifa, a radical left-wing group, a domestic terrorist organization. And I think that the left, people that have some brains left on their shoulders, are starting to realize that, this might actually be a problem. That these monsters that they have created by creating a situation that coddled and promoted hatred from these morons, these idiots that are out there protesting and rioting, etc., and causing violence. And it's been going on for so long that the lunatics are now running the insane asylum. That's where we are today. So let's go look at the actual article from The Atlantic. This is by Daniel Byman. He writes, no matter how hard ideologues try to exclusively blame their political foes for acts of violence, the truth is that violent extremists today emerge from across the political spectrum. We have studied this problem and believe that our data can help illuminate an issue too often defined by partisan finger-pointing. As part of a study to be published this week by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, we compiled and analyzed a data set of 750 attacks and plots in the United States from January 1st of 1994 to July 4th of 2025. Our research, The Atlantic writes, focuses only on incidences of terrorism, which we defined as attacks or plots by non-state actors attempting to achieve a political end and exert a psychological influence on a broad population. Among other details, this data set includes the types of weapons used, intended targets, the number of fatalities, and the ideology of the perpetrators. Now, Daniel writes that we found that left-wing terrorism has increased since President Donald Trump's rise to political prominence in 2016. No shit. Indeed, 2025 marks the first time in more than 30 years that left-wing attacks outnumbered those from the far right. And that is patently absurd. And again, as I was mentioning earlier, they reclassify a lot of these political radicals as right-wing. They find ways to try and label them. Like the Charlottesville guy, absolutely left-wing, magically turns into a right-wing conservative, and that's how they try to blame Republicans, blame the right. But the numbers are fraudulent, and maybe I'll do that in a future show. We'll break down all of the different violent attacks, political attacks over the last couple of years, and showcase just how absurd this insinuation by Daniel from The Atlantic is. Anyway, he continues, despite its recent increase, however, left-wing terrorism is not nearly as common today as it was in the 1960s and early 70s, meaning when they were bombing government buildings, trying to murder people, like Obama's idol, whatever his name was. I'm drawing a blank on it. But anyway, so those years marked the height of groups such as the Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Army. That's right, the Weather Underground. Best known for kidnapping the newspaper heiress Patty Hearst. And in the 1980s and early 90s, left-wing terrorism declined while jihadist and right-wing terrorism rose. We need to cite some sources here, particularly in the forms of anti-government and white supremacist group. And again, see, we go for this, well, it's white supremacy. No. White supremacy is a historically left-wing problem. It's always been the Democrat Party, the KKK, Democrat Party, slave states, Democrat Party. It's been one of the big lies of this country that, white supremacy is a right-wing problem. It never has been. I mean, I'm sure there's always some outliers out there, but that's just not how it is. Now, following that trend, The Atlantic writes, according to our analysis, violence on the left accounted for 4 plots and attacks from 1994 to 2000, compared to with 144 on the right. That difference narrowed in the following decade, but the right continued to account for significantly more attacks and killings than did the left. We need to see some citing of evidence here. Now, the year 2016 was a turning point for left-wing terrorism. Even as right-wing incidences remained much more common, again, let's cite some proof here, Trump's political ascent and the expansion of the MAGA movement seems to have re-energized left-wing violent extremism. Wrong-o! BLM, Antifa, were going hard to the paint. Remember the Hands Up Don't Shoot riots? Remember the George Floyd riots? These guys were operating independently of Donald Trump. The rise happened during the Obama years because, unfortunately, the Obama administration inflamed racial tensions. He inadvertently, or possibly on purpose, depending on, I guess, how you view it, got rid of decades worth of coming together between all the different races here in the U.S. Back in the 90s, it was a big deal to not see color. And of course, today, not seeing color is now seen as racist. Anyway, let's continue with this article. Trump's political ascent and the expansion of the MAGA movement seem to have re-energized left-wing violent extremism, which accounted for the 37 incidents from 2016 to 2024, most of them motivated by either anti-government or partisan sentiment. By July 4th of this year, far-left extremists had already been responsible for 5 terrorist attacks and plots, putting 2025 on pace to be the left's most violent year in more than 3 decades. Let's see. Now, on July 4th, The Atlantic writes, for example, law enforcement officials say that an assailant shot and wounded a police officer who was responding to reports of a disturbance at U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facility in Texas. Meanwhile, another alleged assailant fired at ICE correctional officers, and authorities apprehended 14 suspects who now face federal charges, including attempted murder of federal officers and firearm-related offenses. Details about Kirk's alleged killer are still emerging. No, they're not. But preliminary evidence indicates that he had left-wing motivations. No shit, and could add to this year's tally. It will. Now, in many cases, this left-wing rag writes, categorizing the ideology of a perpetrator is difficult. It's really not, if not impossible. Some extremists pick from a salad bar of ideologies, as the former FBI director Christopher Wray once said, many of which don't fit the traditional right-left dichotomy. See, again, this is some complete bull coming from The Atlantic. There are wide berths of what is right-wing and what is left-wing. Now, you might have someone who might have an occasional, bent to the right or bent to the left, but they're going to have an overwhelming point of view, a POV. And we can see this track for the last 10 to 15 years. You can't tell. What a ridiculous thing. Now, in other instances, such as the 2011 shooting of Democrat Representative Gabby Giffords, the perpetrators' beliefs are so muddled that even calling them political exaggerates their coherence. Oh, no, it doesn't. What kind of crack is this? Despite the fact that the target is a political figure. Now, it's not. The Atlantic goes on to write that a major shift in politics, however, can cause the losing side to become more combative. Just as Trump's election led to a rise in left-wing violence, President Barack Obama's election corresponded with a surge of violence from the right. From 2009 to 2016, right-wing extremists were responsible for 106 terror attacks and plots, nearly double the 58 right-wing incidents that occurred in the 8 years prior. These tend to be more lethal than left-wing attacks. What a bunch of crack, which generally target specific individuals. How many people did BLM end up killing during their massive riots and protests, during the hands up, don't shoot, during the George Floyd incidents? What do you mean right-wing attacks? Like, I didn't hear about 106 terrorist attacks by right-wing radicals. Okay. We're going to have to fact check this when their data comes out. I got to see. Anyway, they go on to say that these tend to be more lethal than left-wing attacks, which generally target specific individuals, such as the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last year, or the assassination attempt on Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course. Right-wing extremists, by contrast, are more likely to target whole groups. In the past decade in the United States, 36 left-wing attacks have killed 13 people, whereas 152 right-wing attacks have killed 112. Now that I just don't believe. Let me pull this up here. Let's see here. I want to see where they're getting this data, because this sounds like a crock. These numbers make no sense to me. Let's see. I'm pulling this up right now. I'm going to find out. Right, meow. Yeah, the BLM and Antifa riots alone. In 2020, 36 people died in just 2020 by BLM and Antifa. So there is no way, when they're trying to tell you that in the past decade in the United States, 36 left-wing attacks have killed 13 people. Bullshit. 100% garbage. This is how they operate. I can't wait to see the actual data when they release it. They said it was coming soon, and when they do, we're going to analyze this, because this is ridiculous. I mean, it's nice that they're admitting that violence from the left is surging, because when even the left wing is starting to come out and say, left wing terrorism is rising. Well, that should tell you how bad the situation actually is, because I think that they understand that the lunatics that are now running the asylum are eventually going to come for them. These people on the left are eventually going to get targeted. There was already, what was it, the ABC building, I think it was, that got attacked, some news outlet, after the Jimmy Kimmel suspension. These guys are so unhinged and so full of hate because the left has been promoting and pushing lunacy, TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, and more, that when they don't get their way, it's straight to death threats, straight to let's harm people that stop our ideology, that stop our belief system from operating. This is why you get like the J.K. Rowlings of the world, who left in every facet that you can count, except says, you know what? I'm for the gay girls having their gay spaces, but not the trans. For that, death threats. Let's get rid of her. Let's dox her. Let's yeet her off the internet. And this kind of stuff has been coddled for far too long. Anyway, let's see. Now, they try to say that this year, violence on the right has plummeted. Only one right-wing terrorist incident occurred in the first 6 months of 2025. The June assassination of the Minnesota State Legislature, Melissa Hortman, and her husband. This extraordinary drop-off is too recent to allow for any definitive explanations, and the number of terror incidents often fluctuates over short periods. But Trump's re-election could be the key factor. His victory deflated election conspiracies that once motivated many of these extremists. And since then, Donald Trump has taken a maximal approach on some of the right's highest priority issues, particularly immigration. And Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boys leader and a convicted seditionist whom Trump pardoned, recently summed up the president's potential psychological effect on the violent far right, saying, "We won, we got what we wanted." Now, under Trump, right-wing extremists may feel less needs to mobilize because they sense that their interests are already being taken care of. But Kirk's death could change this calculus. Yeah, you keep on killing right-wing people, you keep on forcing violence on these people, and at some point, you might get the right hitting back. Yeah, I think that Charlie Kirk could very well be a bellwether. And I think it really depends on what happens next. If we see a serious crackdown on radical leftism, if we see the Trump administration, now that they've categorized Antifa as a terrorist organization, if we see them go after them, and if we see arrests, if we see dark money that's been funding them get exposed, and those people find themselves under the long arm of the law, then I think you might see right-wing counter-violence not crop up. Because make no mistake, the right just wants to live their life in most instances. Most people on the right believe in individualism, rugged individualism, and they just want to live their lives. They want to have their families. They want to make their babies. They want to pass on their genes to the next generation. They're not out there protesting and rioting. That's just not a right-wing thing that happens very often unless they feel they have no choice. And killing right-wing leaders would definitely, I think, be a cause for serious alarm there. Anyway, The Atlantic goes on to say that conservatives, including members of Congress and online influencers, have used the assassination to support the contention that the left is engaged in war. What do you mean they're using this? They're pointing out that the left is engaging in a war. Because they are. Now, this sort of rhetoric, the Atlantic goes on to write, could encourage right-wing vigilantism or a government crackdown on left-leaning organizations, which in turn could inflame left-wing extremism and pose a grave threat to free speech. I hate to break it to the Atlantic, but left-wing extremism is already at an all-time high in this country. I think probably the closest we've ever been to this point would be right around the time of the Civil War, when people were getting killed left and right. Now, exaggerated rhetoric across party lines also helps explain why both Republicans and Democrats believe that more than 40% of the other side supports murder if it serves their political interests. Bull again. All you have to do is go to Twitter, go to Blue Sky, and you will see hundreds of thousands of accounts celebrating murder and death of political opponents. This isn't an ethereal dream of what's happening on the other side. You can see it in real time, in 4K, what these sons of bitches are saying about Charlie Kirk, about Republicans, about Donald Trump. It's in your face. It's everywhere. Even if you weren't a political wonk and you didn't have political news in your feed, you would still get it. you would still get these radical lunatics showing up in your feed, celebrating, calling for more deaths. It was that prevalent. This is the game changer. You can't hide behind, well, each side says, shut the hell up. Yeah, are there radicals? Are there fringe radicals on both sides? Yes. Is it overwhelmingly leftist? Oh, that's a hell yes. Now, in reality, The Atlantic tries to convince us less than 4% of Americans support partisan violence. That would be a very big 4% of the Democrat Party if that's true. I don't think 4% is real here. I mean, I get that, X and blue sky is not real life. But I don't know. I really don't believe that 4% number. That 4% of Americans support partisan violence such as assault or arson, let alone murder. I'm sorry. I think that's complete and utter garbage. No, even that number is too high, of course, The Atlantic goes on to say, placating us, but it would surely drop if partisans stopped misconstruing their opponents. Maybe the left should stop saying Trump is Hitler, Trump is Orange Man bad, Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. Maybe they should stop saying that the end of the country is nigh and that we just have to do something about it. Just saying. Though actually staunching political violence will require America's leaders to commit to fighting all forms of extremism, not just those associated with their opponents. Really, Atlantic? The Trump administration has prioritized combating the rise of left-wing terrorism, but not right-wing terrorism. Well, you yourself pointed out that so-called right-wing terrorism has dramatically dropped off on its own. And he himself has been freaking shot at. I mean, what do you want the guy to do? I'll tell you right now, if I'm sitting there and I'm getting shot at and I became president and there was someone trying to assassinate me and it's my left-wing opponents that are promoting it, calling me a Nazi, saying I should be stopped at all costs, and seeing all these tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of accounts online calling for my murder, you don't think I'm going to focus on that first? And when you're a friend, because Charlie Kirk was a friend to Donald Trump, he was a friend to J.D. Vance, he's dead. The guy got killed. Yeah, you don't think he's not going to focus on these SOBs that are trying to kill him? Color me not surprised. Oh no, he's only focusing on left-wing terrorism. The are these idiots thinking? Now I get it. They're a political rag, left-wing rag, and they're writing to their readers. But still, how do you not see this? I mean, this is in your face, slapping you repeatedly over and over again, trying to wake you the hell up, saying, hey, stupid, wake up. Now, developing the programs and expertise to suppress different forms of terrorism takes years. You want to bet it's going to take years? I think they're going to be moving with a purpose. I think you're going to see the Trump administration ramp this up so fast your head's going to spin, because he knows he only has 3.5 years to get everything he wants done. Why do you think there's been all these executive orders flooding the system? He learned from his first term. He learned about political activism in the judiciary. He learned that his political allies were going to sabotage him, as they did in his first term. So he is going balls to the wall here to obliterate his enemies. At least that's my humble opinion. Now, condemning all political violence, they go on to write, especially when it emanates from one's own side or targets one's opponent, is also an important means of breaking the cycle of distrust. Right. Many prominent Democrats have done this since Kirk's shoot. No, they are running cover for themselves because they understand that they are in deep, that they have been promoting violence, and that these idiots are going insane and crazy at horrifying numbers. They know that they are on the verge of a massive crackdown. So yeah, left-wing leaders are like, oh, we condemn all political violence. Now, The Atlantic acknowledges that many Republicans, after the assassination of Hortman and the attack on Paul Pelosi in 2022, also did the same thing because that's par for the course for the right. Still, both sides need to improve, as evidenced by some left-wing celebrations of Luigi Mangione, the alleged killer of Thompson, the healthcare executive, and the failure of some conservative leaders to expressly condemn white supremacists, Hortman's assassin, and other violent extremists. Of course, they neglected to mention the massive, overwhelming celebration of the Charlie Kirk murder. Thank you very much, Atlantic. Now, Utah Governor Spencer Cox has served as a model in unequivocally denouncing extremists, which make them outcasts instead of heroes. Cox described Kirk's killing as, quote, an attack on all of us, and he offered a simple exhortation that would benefit both sides, particularly in moments like these when violence can spiral. Disagree better. Oh my God, are you disagree better? Okay, yeah, that the right-wing party in Utah hates Governor Cox and his disagree better, which is a statewide joke in Utah. So there you go. That is The Atlantic. And I'll tell you, as I was saying at the top of the show, that this, I mean, it has to be bad for a left-wing rag to actually report on this. Because just from 2023 to 2024, anti-Semitism from the left exploded by 325%. The left is losing the plot. The younger generation is feeling disillusioned. You had the massive lockdowns. You had the job market crater. There hasn't been a lot of opportunities unless you're a girl and you're selling your butthole for $5.99 on OnlyFans. You know, there's not a lot going on here that is great for these younger generations. And so, particularly on the left, when they're already feeling lost and your party's telling you that the end is nigh, that Donald Trump is going to take over the world, we're all going to live under a dictatorial fascist government. What do you think is going to happen? I don't know. How is this a thing? Where are these people coming from? Man.